Imagine a creature engineered to climb out of a frozen river using literal ice picks attached to its wrists.
Right, which sounds totally made up.
It does. And imagine it can track a 500-pound bear through deep powder in absolute silence. And then it just comes home to meticulously wash its own face with its paws like a house cat.
It's just it sounds like something straight out of mythology, honestly. But it is an incredibly real, highly specialized animal.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack this massive stack of material for you. We've got Kennel Club standards, deep historical breed records, expert behavioral guides, the works.
Yeah, we are really getting into the weeds on this one.
We are. We are going to explore the striking physical appearance, the highly unique characteristics, and that fascinating literal split in the breed between the Japanese Akita and the American Akita.
Because when you look at today's subject, you are looking at a dog of just stunning contradictions. And to really understand both that physical form and the incredibly complex mindset of the Akita, you have to look at the environment that forged it.
Right, the geography.
Exactly. We have to go back to its origins in the snowy, mountainous regions of northern Japan, specifically the Akita Prefecture.
Makes sense, given the name.
Yeah, because in that harsh, unforgiving environment, the dog's very survival dictated its design. Form follows function perfectly here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to understand how the Akita split into two entirely different dogs, we really need to understand the foundational physical traits.
The baseline hardware.
Exactly, the hardware. Reading through all this, I couldn't help but compare the Akita's body to a highly specialized piece of winter sports gear. I want to walk through the anatomy of this because it totally blew my mind how purposeful everything is.
It really is engineered. The baseline Akita is a substantial, heavy-boned Spitz-type dog. And as a Spitz breed, every single aspect of its appearance is defined by extreme cold weather adaptations.
So let's start with the coat. They have a thick double coat, which, that sounds normal for a winter dog.
Sure.
But there's a specific mechanic to it, isn't there?
There is, yeah. The double coat consists of this harsh, straight, weather-resistant outer coat that literally repels driving snow and icy water.
Wow.
And then beneath that, there's a soft, incredibly dense undercoat that traps body heat. And if you've ever owned one, you know that undercoat sheds or blows twice a year.
Oh, the shedding. I've seen videos. It's
Yeah.
massive, overwhelming clumps of fur.
Oh, yeah. It's just everywhere. But it helps them regulate temperature as seasons change.
So they basically wear a heavy waterproof parka over a thick down sweater.
That's a great way to put it.
But it's not just the fur. You look at their heads and they have these small, dark, deeply set, triangular eyes.
Right.
When I first looked at photos, I just thought, oh, it gives them a very intense, focused expression. But that deeply set shape isn't just an aesthetic feature, is it?
Not at all. Think about the conditions in those snowy mountains. Those deeply set triangular eyes act almost like built-in snow goggles.
Built-in snow goggles. That is wild.
Yeah, the shape and depth protect the sensitive tissues of the eyes from biting winds, flying ice crystals, and that harsh glare of the sun reflecting off the snow.
Incredible. And then we move down to the tail, which is arguably their trademark.
Oh, absolutely.
It's this thick, plush tail carried over the tops of their backs, usually in like a gentle or double curl. But again, it's not just there to look majestic.
What's fascinating here is the sheer utility of that tail. When the temperatures plummet to dangerous extremes and the dog needs to rest, they curl themselves into a tight ball.
Like a fox.
Exactly like a fox. And that thick, plush tail is then positioned perfectly over their nose and face. It essentially acts as a built-in respirator.
Wait, a respirator?
Yeah. As they breathe in the freezing air, the tail filters and warms it before it ever hits their lungs.
So it's a built-in scarf and an air heater.
Precisely.
And then we get to the feet, which I found completely wild. They have these tightly closed, well-knuckled feet. The records call them cat-like, but they also have webbed toes.
Yep, webbed toes.
Why does a mountain dog need webbed toes?
For the exact same reason you'd wear snowshoes. The webbing between the toes effectively increases the surface area of their paws.
Oh, to float on the snow.
Exactly. When this heavy, muscular dog is running across deep, fresh snow, those webbed feet distribute their weight so they glide over the surface rather than plunging chest deep into the powder.
And we can't forget the ice picks. I mentioned those in the intro.
Ah, yes, the dew claws.
Right.
Historically, the front dew claws on the Akita were not removed, as they often are in modern dog breeding. They were kept intact.
Because they use them to climb, right.
Yeah. If the dog happened to break through thin ice and fall into a freezing river, they would literally use those sharp front dew claws to grip the slick ice and haul their heavy bodies out of the water.
I am trying to picture that. It's like a mountaineer using ice axes.
It really is.
But this level of engineering begs a question. What were they actually doing up there in the mountains?
They were hunting. You see, the ancestors of these dogs were the Matagi Inu.
The Matagi?
Right. The Matagi were traditional indigenous hunters of the Tushoku region, and this wasn't sport hunting, This was grueling survival.
Right.
They used these heavily engineered dogs to track and subdue incredibly large, dangerous game in steep, snow-covered terrain. We're talking wild boar, elk, and specifically the Yezo bear.
Which is a massive brown bear.
Huge. So yeah, form perfectly follows function here.
Okay, so you have a dog built to survive the harshest winters on Earth, silently tracking 500-pound bears. That rugged mountain design is the baseline.
The foundation, yeah.
But this is where the story takes a really wild turn, because historical events caused a literal divergence in its physical evolution. Today, if you look at Akitas, you're not just looking at one type of dog. You're looking at two distinct variations, the fox versus the bear.
Yes, the divergence between the American Akita and the Japanese Akita. And if you put them side by side today, the physical differences are incredibly stark.
Like night and day.
Absolutely. The American Akita is the bear. It is significantly heavier and larger. Mature males can stand up to 28 inches at the shoulder.
And weigh what, like up to 130 pounds?
Easily up to 130 pounds. They have a massive broad head, heavy bone structure, and often feature loose facial skin.
Whereas the Japanese Akita is noticeably smaller and lighter. Their features are much more refined, the bone structure is less heavy.
Right.
And their head shape is consistently described in the breed standards as fox-like, with a much crisper, tighter face. So how do we get from one unified mountain hunter to these two vastly different dogs?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at World War II. During the war in Japan, the Akita was pushed to the absolute brink of extinction.
The conditions were just devastating from what I read.
They were. There were massive food shortages, meaning keeping a dog that eats as much as an Akita was nearly impossible.
Yeah, you just couldn't feed them.
Exactly. But tragically, it went further than that. A government order demanded that all non-military dogs be culled.
Mostly so their fur could be used to line military garments for the soldiers, right? That is just heartbreaking.
It is an incredibly dark chapter.
I was reading that the only breed officially exempt from this cull was the German Shepherd, because they were actively utilized as military working dogs.
Precisely. So imagine you are a desperate Japanese dog breeder trying to save your beloved Akitas from this cull. What do?
You crossbreed them.
Yes, you crossbreed them with German Shepherds to blur the lines and hopefully gain an exemption. And prior to the war, some had also been crossed with Mastiffs to increase their size for fighting.
Yeah, oh.
So the combination of these survival tactics created a very specific, heavy-set line of dogs, most famously known as the Dowa line.
And this is where the split happens.
Yeah.
Because after the war, American servicemen stationed in Japan during the occupation see these dogs. They fall in love with these substantial, heavy-boned, bear-like dogs from the Dewa line, and they start bringing them back to the United States.
Exactly. The Americans took that specific, heavy-set, wartime crossbreed back home, and that became the foundation for what we now call the American Akita.
Right.
They just continued to breed for that massive size and imposing bear-like presence.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I'm following this. If the Mastiff and German Shepherd crossbreeds are what actually helped the dogs survive the war, wouldn't the Japanese breeders want to keep the genetics of those survivors?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. Why didn't they just embrace the Dewa line?
That is the crucial question, and it really speaks to a deep philosophical difference, that Japanese breeders did not view the Dewa line as the savior of the breed.
Oh, really?
No, they viewed it as a tragic dilution of a national treasure. In their minds, the true Akita had been lost to the war. So they completely rejected the heavy bear-like dogs.
Interesting.
They turned to a different line, the Ichinosek line, and began this painstaking, multi-decade restoration process.
So they were basically trying to reverse engineer the dog.
Exactly. They actively sought out the few remaining dogs in remote villages that still closely resembled the original Matagi Inu.
Those agile, original mountain hunting dogs.
Right. And they systematically bred out the Mastiff and German Shepherd traits. Their goal was to completely restore the breed to its original, pure, fox-like Spitz appearance from before the war.
That is fascinating.
Mhm.
So if we look at the sources without taking any sides in this historical debate, the American Akita is essentially a living 1940s time capsule of a specific, heavy-set wartime crossbreed,
Yes.
while the Japanese Akita is a modern, painstaking reconstruction of an ancient ideal.
That perfectly encapsulates it, and you can imagine why this breed split was fiercely controversial for decades in the kennel club world.
Oh, I'm sure.
It became this massive global debate over what constitutes true authenticity. The American perspective was, hey, we preserved the rugged dog that literally survived the war. While the Japanese perspective was, no, you preserved a corrupted version of the dog, and we are recreating the pure, idealized hunting dog.
And they just couldn't agree.
Yeah.
But the kennel club politics eventually caught up to reality. As of 2020, the AKC officially followed global organizations like the FCI, and they now recognize the American Akita and the Japanese Akita as two completely separate breeds.
Yep, the split is final and official. Two different breeds, two entirely different sets of standards.
Which is how we end up with the visual divide. Because if you were to see these two dogs side by side today, size and head shape are one thing, but how they enforce this divide through coat color is wild.
Oh, the color rules are intense.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading the Kennel Club rules on color, it really felt to me like the Japanese Akita is wearing a highly regulated traditional uniform, whereas the American Akita is just wearing whatever it wants.
The contrast in the breed standards for color is definitely the most striking and immediate way to tell them apart. For the American Akita, it truly is an anything-goes palette.
Basically no rules.
Exactly. The standard explicitly states that all dog breed coat colors and patterns are allowable.
Right. So you'll see American Akitas with pinto patterns, you know,
Yeah.
those large cow-like patches of color.
Yeah.
And they very famously can have a stark black face mask, almost like a bandit.
The black mask is practically a hallmark of the American Akita. But if you present a dog with a black mask or pito markings or a black coat to a Japanese Akita judge,
You're qualified.
immediately disqualified from the ring. The Japanese standard is incredibly restrictive. They only allow red, fawn, sesame, brindle, and pure white.
And it's even stricter than that. There's this mandatory rule for the Japanese Akita called the urajiro.
Ah, yes.
I had to read this section 3 times. Can you explain how the urajiro works?
The urajiro is a highly specific, required whitish coat marking. For a Japanese Akita to be recognized as a proper specimen, unless the dog is already pure white all over, it absolutely must possess this whitish hair in very specific locations.
Like where?
It has to appear on the sides of the muzzle, on the cheeks, on the underside of the jaw, running down the neck and chest, on the body, the tail, and on the inside of the legs.
It's literally a painted-on pattern. It's like they have a white underside and a colored top. Why go to such extreme lengths to mandate a color pattern? It seems so rigid compared to the American version.
Because they were so obsessed with purging that Mastiff and German Shepherd blood we talked about, they didn't just look at bone structure. They instituted this wildly strict color code as literal proof of purity.
Oh, I see.
Japan considers the Akita a natural monument. In the eyes of Japanese preservationists, the urajiro isn't just a pretty aesthetic choice. It is a visible genetic receipt.
A genetic receipt. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it proves the dog is a pure Spitz. The strict color palette is tied entirely to that cultural desire to preserve the breed exactly as it was meant to be, untainted by wartime crossbreeding.
That makes perfect sense when you frame it like that. But as rigid as these rules are, genetics sometimes throw a curveball. While digging through all this, I found this fascinating anomaly called the moku, or the long-coat Akita.
Ah, the moku. This is a very interesting genetic quirk that managed to slip through all that rigorous breeding.
Right.
There is an autosomal recessive gene traced back to an old breed called the Karafutoken that sometimes pops up when both parents happen to carry it.
And the result is a dog with much longer, softer hair, sometimes 3 to 4 inches long, which completely breaks the standard double coat rule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, in the highly competitive dog show ring, a moku is considered a major fault. You won't see them winning ribbons.
Sure.
But outside the ring, these long-coated Akitas are actually highly sought after by some pet owners. And it's not just because they look like giant fluffy teddy bears.
It's the temperament, right?
Yeah, that specific recessive gene is famously linked to a much sweeter, more docile temperament.
Which is a brilliant transition because we really need to talk about what is going on inside the heads of these dogs. We've painted this complete picture of what the Akita looks like. The heavy bones, the fox or bear heads, the strict colors.
The hardware?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we have to look at the powerful personality housed inside that robust physical frame. We need to look at the software running on this hardware.
And it was highly complex software. The Japanese actually use three very specific philosophical terms to define the ideal Akita temperament. Okay. And if you want to understand the breed, you really have to understand these concepts. The first is kani, which translates roughly to bravery, spirited boldness, and a composed mental strength.
Like a fearless confidence.
Yes. The second is ryosei, which means faithful devotion and a gentle, affectionate disposition. The behavioral guides note that kani and ryosei cannot exist without each other.
So the dog must be both brave and gentle.
Exactly. And finally, there is soboku, which translates to an unadorned elegance and a natural, open spirit.
Hang on, let me make sure I'm following the reality of this. Unadorned elegance. For a 130-pound dog built to wrestle bears, how does that actually manifest in a living room?
It manifests as a massive dual nature. Soboku refers to their dignified, almost aristocratic calmness when they aren't working. Practically speaking, this results in a dog that is profoundly loyal and affectionate with their own families.
Okay.
When they are with their people, they are often described as being gentle as a kitten. But to strangers, that kani takes over.
The bravery.
Right. They are inherently aloof, highly cautious, and fiercely territorial. The phrase often used is fierce as a samurai.
You know, I brought up the cat analogy in the intro, and the more I read about their behavior, the more it seems like they have cat software running on dog hardware.
It's an incredibly apt analogy for their day-to-day behavior. They are naturally dominant dogs, which means they are notoriously independent.
Oh, totally. The behavioral guides say they literally groom themselves like cats, wiping their faces with their paws after eating.
Yes, they do.
They're notoriously fastidious about keeping themselves clean. And like a cat, they prefer affection strictly on their own terms. But that independence comes with some serious behavioral challenges that any owner has to be ready for.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine trying to walk a 130-pound dog that decides entirely on its own that the dog across the street is a threat.
And that is a very real scenario. They have a massive prey drive, meaning they are prone to chasing smaller animals. And there's a well-documented known issue with same-sex aggression towards other dogs.
So they aren't exactly social butterflies at the local dog park.
Not at all. But interestingly, for a dog with so much presence and power, they're a surprisingly quiet breed. They very rarely bark.
I love this detail. Instead of barking, they communicate with their families through this wide vocabulary of grunts, moans, groans, and mumbles.
Yeah, the Akita mumble.
It's like they're literally trying to talk to you under their breath.
Yeah.
But getting back to those challenges, how does someone manage a dog that is huge, highly independent, territorial, and prone to aggression with other dogs?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it all makes perfect sense. These dogs were solitary mountain hunters and later royal guards for Japanese nobility.
Right.
They were selectively bred for centuries to assess threats completely independently and act decisively without waiting for a human command.
Right. If you're out in the snow and a bear charges, you don't have time to look back at your human and wait for a command. You have to react instantly.
Exactly. That historical programming is hardwired into their DNA. Today, that translates into a dog that fundamentally requires a confident, experienced owner.
Not a first-time dog owner.
Definitely not. An Akita needs a person who can establish themselves as a calm, firm pack leader. The behavioral guides unanimously stress the absolute necessity of rigorous early socialization.
So getting them out and about when they're young.
Yes, you have to expose them to countless people, environments, and other dogs while they are puppies, so they learn what is and isn't a threat.
And I imagine you can't just bully a dog this size into submission.
Absolutely not. If you use harsh or physical training methods, an Akita will simply shut down, or worse, become defiant and dangerous.
Right.
They require consistent positive reinforcement. But if you put in the work and provide that strong, gentle leadership, they will reward you with an unparalleled, almost mythical level of loyalty.
It's an incredible journey from the snowy mountains of Japan to living rooms around the world. So what does this all mean for us today?
Well, it means a lot.
It means that whether you are looking at the massive, bear-like American Akita with its black mask, or the smaller, strictly regulated, fox-like Japanese Akita with its painted-on Urajiro markings, you are looking at a dog shaped by extreme forces.
Very true.
You're looking at an animal forged by harsh climates, devastated by historical wars, and rigidly reconstructed by human pride, all housing a deeply complex, independent mind.
It is a remarkable legacy. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, based on those fascinating vocalizations we just discussed.
The grunting and mumbling.
Yeah. The records show that the Akita was bred to hunt massive, dangerous bears in the snowy mountains in absolute terrifying silence.
Right.
Yet when you bring this same dog inside the home, they are famously vocal, talking to their human families in a highly unique, intimate language of grunts, groans, and moans.
It's just so true.
It leaves you wondering, when you invite an Akita into your home, have you actually tamed a wild, silent mountain hunter? Or have you simply been evaluated, deemed worthy, and accepted into its highly exclusive communicative pack?